Oh, on a day when plenty of media outlets are knocked offline by the Microsoft outage, we're actually going next level on PFT PM. New platform for the afternoon or late morning, as the case may be, podcast with graphics and other things to make it feel like PFT Live, but for the fact that I'm down in my basement kitchen / wine cellar that has maybe 20 bottles of wine in it and room for about 2,000. But I digress. I'm not even supposed to be here today because I was at the beach and the drive home was supposed to happen mañana. But what happened was yesterday we packed up and left. My wife and I did because somebody tested positive for COVID. And it wasn't me, at least not yet. The day before, her sister tested positive. She and her family took off because we have elderly parents. My wife's parents were with us, and obviously, they fall squarely into the demographic of people who could have a serious outcome in the event that they would contract COVID. So the objective became making sure they don't get it. So once my sister-in-law tested positive, she left the house. And then yesterday, Jill tested positive. We left the house. 8 to 9 hours in the car, fairly close proximity, after being around her the entire time before she tested positive. So I fully expect to have bout number 2 with COVID. And if I do get it, look, I had my physical this year. I talked it all through with my doctor, given where everything is. I have no concern about it. And most healthy people shouldn't. But the last time I got it, 2 weeks later, I had a kidney stone. So I am going to basically be drinking water nonstop. I might get an IV bag as well with just fluid, because I don't want another kidney stone. I'll take COVID again. I'll do that. I do COVID in my sleep. Kidney stone, not interested. Okay. Hopefully you're interested in catching up on what's been happening in the National Football League. I apologize first and foremost for not being able to do the show in recent days. Last Wednesday, I knew it was going to be a long shot. It didn't work out. Thursday, Friday, I wasn't home. Saturday, we went to the beach. When we get to the beach, and what happens is we don't go to the same place every year. My wife finds, right after we get back from the Super Bowl, she begins the search for an acceptable house that would hold 15 to 20 people at a level of, accommodation that we're accustomed to. So she found a place this year in Oak Island, North Carolina, and we find out when we get there what else is there. Because the main thing is, are there enough rooms to hold everybody? And we assume that the house is otherwise going to be nice, and this place was nice. The problem is there was no place for me to do this in a way that allowed me the privacy that I need to do it without people milling about. And I don't want to bother everybody else. I don't want people to not be able to go about their day because, for 1 hour a day, Monday through Friday, or as the case would have been Monday through Thursday, I'm taking the place over because I'm doing the podcast. So that's why you haven't seen me or heard from me in this context since Tuesday, a week ago, 10 days, long 10 days. But there's still plenty of stuff at PFT. I've no days off there. No days off there since January 1 of 2004. That was the only New Year's resolution I've ever honored. And that was, if I'm ever going to make this business into anything, I need to work on it every single day. And I have every single day without taking a day off, without failing to post content since that day, 20 and a half years later. Here we are. All right, here we are with Brandon Aiyuk. There's been developments this week. For the first time in his on-again, off-again relationship with the 49ers, he has asked officially and respectfully, the key word is respectfully. I get the feeling it's about as respectful as the kitchen at the original beef, but respectfully requested a trade. And what I wrote yesterday, and I've kind of felt this all along, I just hadn't articulated it. My original reaction when we saw that Brandon Aiyuk was due to make $14.1 million this year, coming off of being a second-team All-Pro, getting over 1,300 receiving yards on only 105 targets. He was second in the league in yards per target at 12.8. Imagine what he would have done with 181 like CeeDee Lamb had. He had 105, and he still did over 1,300 receiving yards and was second-team All-Pro. 14.1. Whatever the appropriate number is, I think we can all agree at a time when we as a people can't agree on anything that 14.1 is too damn low. So at some point, Brandon Aiyuk needed to agitate, because otherwise the 49ers were just going to try to, I think, coast through their contract situation and hold the veterans together for one more year. Now they had to redo some of the contracts and create some cap space, like George Kittle. I think Deebo Samuel also did a little something, but you've got Kittle and Samuel with big cap numbers, Trent Williams with a big cap number, Nick Bosa, second year of his contract, Brock Purdy, final year prior to when he will be eligible for a new contract. Christian McCaffrey gets a new deal. And here's Aiyuk. If you can hold him, it's a puzzle. If you can hold him in place as that corner piece at 14-1, it makes it easier to otherwise balance your cap. And I think they were hoping he would go along with that. And maybe after this year, they move on from Deebo Samuel and Brandon Aiyuk gets his reward and he becomes the top receiver. I don't know what they were thinking about doing after this year. I just had a feeling, I didn't hear this, but I think it's just common sense. They're just trying to get through this season and then some hard decisions about some pretty recognizable names. Kittle, Samuel, the two biggest, maybe Trent Williams as well, as he's getting older. We all are. But they would make those decisions after the season. And if Aiyuk would go along with taking 14-1, that would work. He's not going along with it. And the one thing that he's finally realized, the way it works in San Francisco, and this is true of most organizations, whether in the NFL or some other sports league or anywhere, sometimes the wheel has got to squeak, because you think about it from the perspective of management. They only have so much bandwidth to deal with whatever issues are in front of them. So you're basically putting out a fire here and putting out a fire there, while you're otherwise trying to advance your agenda and take care of whatever projects you have, the things you're trying to proactively do to advance the interests of the company. While you're doing that, you've got stuff that pops up. You've got discontent among the workforce. Jim wants a raise. Gary wants to be transferred to a different branch, whatever it may be. Two people aren't getting along. You got to deal with those issues while you're otherwise trying to make the business go. So in the past, what we've seen with the 49ers, when there's a guy who's not happy, he makes it known he's not happy, and the 49ers have to deal with it. The 49ers weren't going to truly deal with Brandon Aiyuk until they had to. And they opted for a more discreet path before this week. And it just didn't work. It didn't work. I've been picking up some bits and pieces over the course of the past several months. Those of you who pay close attention to PFT Live and read the website know that we've reported a long time ago. The Steelers called the 49ers late February, around the time of the scouting combine, and inquired about Brandon Aiyuk, and they were told there will be no trade. Now, at some point after that, and I think the semantics have been very important, especially to Aiyuk's camp. I don't think he ever wanted it to be perceived that he was asking to be traded. What happened was, during these negotiations aimed at getting Aiyuk a better contract, the possibility was suggested of Aiyuk, through his agent, showing that other teams would pay him what the 49ers won't. And at the time, I think the number was around 28. It's probably gone up since then because the market has changed. But let's rewind to March, April, those weeks before the draft, after the money flowed in free agency, and you've got this guy available, and there are teams that have yet to exhaust first-round draft picks on receivers or high second-round picks on receivers, and maybe they would trade for Aiyuk and pay him. However they got there, the end result was Aiyuk's agent had permission to see if there were teams out there that would give him what he wanted. And I'm told that there were, at the end of the day, 5 teams willing to do what Aiyuk wanted by way of paying him. The problem, though, is in a situation like this, it's not enough to just pay him. You've got to trade for him. The 49ers didn't like any of the offers that were made by the interested teams to them so that they could pay Aiyuk the contract the 49ers want. You can imagine how frustrating that's got to be for the player. My current employer won't give me what I want. There's somebody else who will, but my current employer wants too much from the somebody else, preventing me from going to that other team and getting what I want. And at some point, this is where the 49ers need to take a step back. And I think that the hope is, now that he's requested a trade, they will do this. And this is a very basic analysis. It's similar to the point I made before the Vikings paid Justin Jefferson. Hey, if you're not going to pay the guy what he wants, trade him to someone who will. So 49ers, if you're not going to pay Brandon Aiyuk what he wants, trade him to someone who will. And I think the flaw in the 49ers thinking is best exemplified by the reality that before the draft, there were teams willing to pay Aiyuk what the 49ers wouldn't and give something up for the privilege of paying him. From the 49ers perspective, all they have to do is pay him. From the perspective of the teams that responded favorably to the idea that, and I think the 49ers were thinking, oh, nobody else is going to pay this guy what he wants. Oh, shit, 5 teams will. They'll do it, and they'll give the 49ers something. But the 49ers wanted too much now. Did they deliberately want too much? Because at the end of the day, they still have the power to say to Brandon Aiyuk, you're under contract this year for $14.1 million. Deal with it. Play for us or play for no one and suffer the financial consequences. In addition to losing the 14-1, you get fined for being away from training camp preseason. For players under their 5th-year option, the fine amount for holding out through a preseason game is the amount of a regular season game check. So divide 14.1 by 18, and that's what he gets fined for each of the 3 preseason games he'd miss. There's no signing bonus money he'd have to pay back, though, because he's in his 5th-year option. But still, you want to play football and you want to get paid. The 49ers hold the keys to your ability to play football, but you only get 14-1. Unless you take whatever they're willing to offer you, which will be below what somebody else presumably is willing to pay. So it's quite a conundrum for the 49ers and for Aiyuk. And now what's Aiyuk's move? Does he hold out? Does he take the best offer the 49ers will give him? Does he go from respectfully requesting a trade to adopting the Deebo Samuel approach where it kind of felt scorched earth? He's done. He's never playing for the 49ers again, wants to be traded to a team in the East Coast. Remember all those reports from when Samuel wanted out? And there was that video clip. Somebody had a sign in a club about Deebo Samuel playing for the 49ers, and he's doing this. Like, it was weird. It was a 180 and then a 180 back again. He's out. He's done. It's over. Oh, wait, they gave him the contract he wanted, and now he's there. So I think what Aiyuk is realizing, he's never going to get the contract from the 49ers unless he agitates for it. And, I mean, the 49ers, maybe they should trade Deebo Samuel. Remember there was some reporting during the draft that the 49ers talked to the Steelers about Deebo Samuel? Maybe that's what they need to do. Because I'm trying to see it from their perspective. They've got their money budgeted based upon the roles. And if Samuel is WR1 and Aiyuk is WR2, maybe you just move on from the guy who's currently in that spot and you promote Aiyuk and you pay him. I haven't researched the salary cap ramifications of that, but there was at least conversation about trading Deebo before the draft, which means before June 1, which means they would have taken a much larger cap charge trading him then. Now that we're past June 1, maybe they just trade Deebo instead. And the other complication, now that the draft has come and gone, and we've talked about this before, but it bears repeating before I move on to the next topic. What do you give the 49ers that helps them get better this year? I think that's why the 49ers have become somewhat stubborn and intransigent in their position that they're not trading him. I've seen the report that we have no intention to trade him. I don't know that they've articulated it that way, because when you say that, you're kind of opening the door for offers. If they're just not going to trade him, that may be a manifestation of the fact that they recognize there's no one out there that can give them someone now that will help them be better. They don't want to compromise their ability to try to compete for a Super Bowl now. If they'd have traded him before the draft, they would have gotten something. They could have tried to load up the cannon to get someone who will help them get to what they've been trying to do. That's the background to all this. You've got a team that's been stuck on 5 Super Bowl wins since how long has it been? 1994. They've been back to the Super Bowl 3 times since then, 2012, 2019, and then most recently this past year, and they still can't get to number 6. They really want to get to number 6, and I think they'd like to keep Aiyuk and Kittle and Samuel and Williams and Purdy and McCaffrey together as a unit. as they try to do that thing that they've been unable to accomplish since the romp over the then San Diego Chargers in January of 1995. So I don't know how it's going to play out, but that's where it all currently stands, and that's my best understanding of how we got here, where we are, and where we go. Have a feeling I'll be bringing it up a time or two as we continue forward in the pre-training camp, now about to be full training camp phase. And remember, it's PFT PM, and I'm going to do my damnedest not to miss a day between now and the return of PFT Live after the Olympics. So this is day one of a streak that hopefully will go, I think, 16 before PFT Live returns. Okay. Another thing that happened this week. And it's funny because and look, I get it. I don't mind. As I've told my wife many times, the same passion that gets fans riled up about the things I say, the ideas I have, the posts I write, it's the passion that gets them to the website in the first place. If you don't care about football, if you're not fully invested in your team, if you're not all in, not in the Jerry Jones way, but in the, like, this is what I love, this is what I'm about, this is what I do, then you're not going to get upset about stuff. So I don't mind that people get upset, because we're here to serve the passionate. And when you serve the passionate, they're going to be passionate about all sorts of things, including the way you serve them. So with that said, the Caleb Williams contract. Here's what happened. I'm at the beach, and yeah, I was kind of working, but it's not like I'm looking for stuff to take up even more of my time. So as we got to the 16th, that would have been Tuesday. That's the day the Bears rookies report. And, you know, over the weekend, we were exploring this angle of Caleb Williams telling the world that he's not handling his contract, to the Bears telling the NFL that they are dealing directly with him because he's not represented by an NFLPA certified agent. And by rule, the Bears aren't allowed to talk to anybody but him. But he created the impression that he wasn't the one doing the talking. And this is not uncommon now when we're dealing with a small group of players who choose to represent themselves. Most of those guys aren't really representing themselves. What they're choosing to do is be represented by someone other than an NFLPA certified agent. And then what happens is they set up a dummy email account that is supposedly the player, but it's actually the lawyer, the non-certified agent, whoever it is that's dealing with the team on the player's behalf. So that was as the week began. And yeah, it makes it a little clunky, and that may be one of the reasons why they didn't have a deal done. So, boom, here comes Tuesday. Deal's done. And all these Bears fans upset at me. Oh, stick it. Oh, Florio, you didn't know what you're talking about. Well, it doesn't change the facts as we were laying them out. It just shows that through this somewhat awkward procedure, they managed to get a deal done. And everybody reported it was done. Everybody reported, and I don't know how many said it was signed, but that was the prevailing message. Rome Odunze, the 9th overall pick, signs. And then later in the day, Caleb Williams is signed. And this is me minding my own business in Oak Island, North Carolina, trying to hang out with my little great nephew who's 2 years old, and we had a great time with him. I started getting text messages, hey, this Caleb Williams deal isn't done. And my first reaction wasn't, yes, to the Batcave. My first reaction was, shit, I really don't want to mess with this right now. So I actually ignored it at first. I was just like, well, maybe this person's wrong. I didn't want to deal with it. I was being lazy. Sue me. Then by the morning, it's like, you know, much as I really don't want to start rubbing this lamp, it's kind of what I do. It's kind of why I'm here, vacation or not. I'm not asking for any special. I'm just I'm leading up to the point that I ultimately will make, I think. Who knows? But I started to do some due diligence and came to the conclusion this contract isn't signed. Now, I also said there's no reason to believe that it won't be, that they do have an agreement. They were haggling over language, but the contract was not signed. And I specifically worked on that because I do 2 spots per week on The Score in Chicago, and I wanted to tell them because I knew that it was going to come up at some point. And it came up right out of the gates, and I said, hey, by the way, your quarterback has not signed his contract. And again, I said the deal is essentially done, but he hasn't signed yet. And through this process of figuring out what happened, I learned that one of the terms he tried to get was a commitment from the Bears not to use the franchise tag, which is permissible under the CBA. We've seen it with other contracts, most notably Dak Prescott with the Cowboys. That's one of the reasons why they don't have an extension in place. The Cowboys don't have the leverage that is baked in by the numbers that would be available under the franchise tag. And they don't have the fallback of, if all else fails, we'll just tag you like they did twice before. They can't do it this time. So it's either sign him or he goes to the market, and the market determines his value. And if you let him get to the market, it's going to cost you a lot more maybe than what it would cost right now. That would be why any player would want to have the franchise tag taken off the table. It doesn't mean Caleb Williams doesn't want to spend his whole career with the Bears. What it does is it allows the player to make more money. See, that was the reaction I saw. Oh, well, if he's good, they'll extend his contract, so they'll never use the franchise tag anyway. That's not the point. The point is the threat of the tag, the cap that the tag puts on your earnings in year 6 and 7 of your career. Because for a first-round pick, 4-year contract, 5th-year option, year 6 franchise tag 1, year 7 franchise tag 2, that artificial limit flowing from the franchise tag calculation makes it harder to get market value. You can always get more if you go to the market and all teams are competing, ostensibly. Not that every team would line up to try to get Caleb Williams, but who knows? I mean, if it was Patrick Mahomes, every team would be lining up to get him. So there's a reason for not wanting it there, and it doesn't mean I want to leave Chicago. It means I want to get the most money that I can. I want to try to beat this system. One way to beat the system is take 3 tags and then become a free agent like Kirk Cousins did. Another way to beat the system is to bake into your contract, you're not going to tag me, like Dak Prescott has done. No rookie's ever done that, but it doesn't mean it's impossible. Williams tried, and he didn't get it. Now, I don't know whether an agent would have gotten it for him, and I'm not going to even begin to suggest that any agent would have pulled this off. But maybe, and I'm always reluctant to name names or name agencies because then the other ones will be wearing me out. Why didn't you mention us? But there are a couple of quarterback specialty agencies that have enough clientele that maybe they could have pulled this off. And the way that it was explained to me, and I also have kind of thought it through, the argument would be, hey, the dad's very involved, and that's good. I'd be very involved if it was my son. And Carl Williams is involved in commercial real estate. He's had a lot of great ideas from what I've heard through the grapevine about how to best position his son. That's what we would all want for our sons. And as sons, that's what we would all want our fathers to do. So you could say to the Bears, if you're one of these agents that represents, other guys on the team, other guys that maybe the Bears want in the future, we got to make this guy happy. And if this person that you have the relationship with is saying, hey, you got to help me out here. Carl really wants this for his son. You got to give me something here. We got to do this. I think it's somebody who can leverage relationships and the fact that they have other clients now and in the future that are going to be negotiating with that same team might have had a chance to do it. If you've been watching Hard Knocks, you can see that in the Brian Burns negotiations, for example, Joe Shane, the Giants GM, tapped into his long-standing relationship with Dan Morgan, the Panthers GM, to maybe get a little better deal. Hey, we need to have friends in this business. He made a comment along those lines. Sometimes it's beneficial to have an agent who represents no one else in the NFL like Russell Wilson has. Then you can take big swings and not be concerned about who you might hit with the bat because you don't have any other clients whose interests are going to be undermined if every team decides this person's an asshole and I don't want to deal with him. But if you have high-profile clients, if you have deep relationships founded on trust with executives, maybe you could be the one to pull it off. And whatever the percentage is, and look, here's why most of these players who choose to represent themselves are doing it. They are offended by the concept of giving up 1%, 2%, or 3% to someone over the next 5 years, when they could hire somebody and pay them by the hour. I understand that. I don't like that idea either. We're already giving Uncle Sam 37%, and then whatever the state tax requirements might be. Yeah, I don't want to give 3% to somebody who makes a couple of phone calls. But what you're also getting is the benefit of that person's experience and knowledge and ability to take those relationships and spin them into something that would have been worth far more than its weight in gold. Whatever the percentage fee would have been, the money that Caleb Williams would have made, assuming he works out, assuming he's good, assuming he's a franchise quarterback, the money he would have made by not having the Bears in a position to tag him, not having that leverage hanging over him when he negotiates his next contract, it would have more than paid whatever fee the agent would have charged. Now, I haven't forgotten that I promised to make a point when I was rambling earlier, not to be confused with the rambling I'm doing now. At the end of the day, when he signed, and this really is, it's funny to me, it's frustrating, but all I can do is laugh about it. Okay, so everyone reports Caleb Williams is signed. We report he hasn't actually signed, but there's a deal in place and they're haggling over language. When he finally does sign after that, Bears fans, not all, but some, are like, oh, see, you were wrong. What about that timeline tells you I was wrong? It's completely accurate. They didn't announce the signing the day everyone said he had signed. They announced it after he actually signed, which came after I said, hey, he hasn't signed. And the deal is done. They're just haggling over language. So, and again, I was on vacation. I wasn't looking, you're just doing this for clicks. No. I don't need to do that anymore. Maybe there was a time when I did years ago when we were trying to get noticed and trying to establish ourselves. It was a different time in the internet and, you really didn't understand how it was all going to work. But now I really don't need to have clickbait. I don't need to try to make something out of nothing. I just try to find stories that I think are interesting. And it becomes interesting when everyone is saying this guy signed his contract and I'm getting multiple text messages saying, hey man, he hasn't signed yet. So that's where we are. He has signed. He is under contract. And at the end of the day, it is a pretty standard deal. He gets his signing bonus in full within 15 days of signing. My understanding is it's standard language for what would void his guarantees. There's no offset language. If they would cut him with money left on his guarantees, if he goes to, there are offsets. I may have misspoke. If he goes to another team, he can't double dip. Let's say he's got $10 million still left to be made from the Bears. I'm just pulling a number out of the air. And he gets cut and he goes and signs with the Dolphins or anyone. Whatever he makes from a new team, the Bears would have their liability to him reduced. So I actually might have the contract now that I got to protect my sources, but there's a chance I have the contract. There's a chance that we might be able to see exactly what's in there and what's not in there. But at the end of the day, this guy had a ton of leverage. They made some big swings. I haven't even mentioned the tax loopholes that they were trying to take advantage of, which are legitimate. There's nothing wrong with that. I saw some negative reaction to the fact that Caleb Williams was trying to negotiate this contract in a way that would be advantageous from a tax standpoint. Unless you're breaking the law, that's permissible. Don't you think every person with money has an accountant who tries to help that person minimize tax? And I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but the laws are the laws. You don't just give money away. If you're going to just give it away, give it to charity. Uncle Sam's doing fine. Deficit. Uncle Sam's doing fine. So if they want to change the laws on what's available by way of the different ways you can pay taxes, then change it. Slam the door on any loopholes. I got no problem with Caleb Williams being very creative. There are things I've heard about like trying to be paid as an LLC, having money treated as a forgivable loan that would be forgiven in 10 years, which is when it would become income. And in 10 years from now, presumably he's making a lot more money. So he's not feeling the pinch and he gets to use the money for 10 years interest free before he has to pay the taxes. Think about what $1 million in taxes today would be a million years from now. Not much at all. 10 years from now, that same million doesn't hit the same way because, the value of money keeps going up and up. Anyway, enough of that. That was the Caleb Williams adventure for the week. All right. Next subject. on this Friday edition of PFT PM. Oh, speaking of money, speaking of millions, I always get a little extra charge out of the legal stuff, especially when it's got 66.6 million in play. That's apparently under Florida law, the end result of what Amit Patel may have to pay them after stealing 22.2 million. According to the reporting that I saw from ESPN.com, there's a provision in Florida law that allows the damages to be tripled when this sort of embezzlement happens. And by way of rewind, Patel essentially admits to embezzling over $20 million from the Jaguars, and the bulk of it went to gambling. $20 million to FanDuel, $1 million to DraftKings. Patel has pleaded guilty, and from the admissions that he's made as part of his guilty plea, the Jaguars have taken that and they've fashioned a civil complaint. Remember, when wrongdoing happens, there's two sides of the legal system to think about: criminal and civil. Someone's rights were violated under the civil laws. You can get compensation that way. So the Jaguars have sued Patel for 22.2 million times 3. Now, unless he wins the lottery at some point in his life, it's kind of hard to imagine the Jaguars getting very much. Presumably, he stole that money and pissed it away and had nothing left when it was all said and done. I don't know what assets were remaining in his FanDuel account or in his bank account or his property or whatever. But this is a way to get whatever he has left. You're still not going to get 66.6 million. I think, and I don't know this, but this is just connecting dots. We'd already seen the report weeks ago that the Jaguars had asked FanDuel to reimburse them all or some of the money that Patel had embezzled. And I remember thinking, yeah, good luck with that. These companies that make their money by taking in money aren't very keen on giving money out, especially when they don't have a legal duty to do so. And I had an item at PFT a couple of weeks ago about a problem that FanDuel's parent company got into in England, because in England, the regulations are a lot more stringent about, for example, noticing that this person who would have no reason to have access to $20 million suddenly has a $20 million account and is a high roller. Signs of problem gambling, signs of embezzlement, theft, fraud, anything that would be funding an excessive amount of gambling. And as the article said, I think it was a Bloomberg article, Bloomberg or Reuters, the notion that there's a fine line between VIPs and problem gamblers. Because the reason you're a VIP isn't because you bet big. You're a VIP because you lose big. Because anybody who bets big is going to lose big. The whole system is designed to screw you as the gambler. But there are some people who love the rush so much and have so much money they don't know what to do with it. I can either build a super yacht or I can just be a high roller and get treated like a big shot. Yeah, they love you because you lose. So at some point in England, the laws require these sports books to, open their eyes and see what's going on here, to not turn a blind eye. In the law, you will hear from time to time standards based on what someone knew or should have known. Is there enough happening that you should know that there might be a problem? So my point is this. I think that maybe this lawsuit is intended to get Patel to now, via what's called a third-party complaint, push the responsibility onto FanDuel and or DraftKings by arguing you need to have procedures in place to spot problem gambling, to spot potential embezzlement and fraud and theft, and you need to cut people off. They cut them off when they win. We know the technology exists because if you are really good at gambling, you're done. But if you're really bad at gambling, it's gimme, 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 gimme. Oh, keep it coming, keep it coming, keep it coming, keep it coming. No matter what evidence there might be to suggest, I don't think this is his money. This might not be his money. Don't ask, don't tell. See no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil. Give me money. Could be a fascinating case. Could be groundbreaking. And there's two ways. And I'll tell you a secret. This is why big companies hate lawyers. And, you hear a lot of talk about regulation, too much regulation. You know who you hear that from? You hear that from the companies that have to spend money to comply with the regulations aimed at helping the little guy. So you can have regulation through governmental action, legislation, agency regulations, etc. And you can have regulation that comes from the civil justice system, where independent lawyers decide what you did to my client is wrong, and I'm going to hold you accountable under the theories that are available to me, under statutes, common law, wherever I can find it. And that's where the regulation can happen, even without the government actually doing it. That's why big companies hate lawyers. They hate lawyers because creative, smart, passionate, and motivated lawyers will prove when you're wrong. They will hold you accountable. They will go to a FanDuel or DraftKings and say, you know what, this is your fault, because you should have realized this guy doesn't have $20 million lying around or laying. We went through that a couple of weeks ago. Somebody emailed me and I didn't bother to read it. He didn't have 20 million lying or laying around. It had to come from somewhere. And at some point, when all this money's flowing in, under the same technology that allows you to say, hey, this guy's winning too much, no more betting for him. Hey, this guy's losing too much, no more betting for him. So I don't think the Jaguars feel comfortable going after them directly because they give a lot of money to the NFL. It probably would be frowned upon at 345 Park Avenue to sue DraftKings or FanDuel. This may be a roundabout way of doing it. And I suggested last night when I wrote about this, it's a pretty simple agreement. You say to Patel, here's what we'll do. You'll cooperate with us and you'll sue them. And we'll take whatever we get from them and whatever you might have left, we'll take that and we'll leave you alone after that. After you serve your time, you come out free and clear. You don't have to worry about, if you do win the lottery, you don't have to worry about us coming and getting any more money. You're the conduit to let us do indirectly what we can't do directly. Anyway, that isn't mentioned in the ESPN report, but I have a feeling that's the next step. He'll have 30 days or thereabouts to respond to this complaint. And I'll be surprised. I was going to say I won't be surprised if. I'm feeling strongly about this enough now to say I'll be surprised if he doesn't file a third-party claim against FanDuel and or DraftKings under this theory that, I'm kind of percolating, and I'm sure there's a lawyer out there that's already done the work to show that there's a legal duty by these sports books to recognize when someone is spending so much that you have reason to at least press pause and explore where this person's getting this money before you just keep taking it, and then say, well, I don't know. He told me. You authorized us to take bets. We're just taking bets. All right. Next topic. I know it's been slow, and I'm not going to name names. I'm not going to call people out, but one of the things I was doing at the beach, I'm looking for things to write about, and I write a story and go hang out with the family a little bit and then come back and write another story. And when it is slow, you got to be creative in your searches for what's out there, what hasn't been covered. It's amazing some of the old news that gets resuscitated just for the purposes of having something on your webpage. We try to avoid that. I mean, if it's something we legitimately missed and never addressed, okay. But, some comments Josh Jacobs made to Chris Long a month ago or bubbling up when he said it a month ago. Who cares? So I say that because, all of a sudden there's a report that Bill Belichick intends to coach next year. Well, no shit, he intends to coach next year. What's ever happened since he was fired by the Patriots that would cause anyone to think he's not trying to come back and coach next year? We're going to give out a Pulitzer for this one? Hey, Bill Belichick plans to coach next year. I mean, come on. Of course he does. The question is, will he get the opportunity? He tried to get back in this year. One team with a vacancy interviewed him. That was the Atlanta Falcons. There were rumors that maybe the Eagles would do a swap of Nick Sirianni to Belichick, or maybe the Cowboys would go Mike McCarthy to Belichick. And those are two of the teams we're watching for next year, along with the Giants, frankly, in the NFC East. And, one of the items that came out during the reporting from ESPN, and there was a lot crammed in there. Hey, there were folks in Washington that really wanted Belichick. And I mean, I had heard some things. And of course, when he wasn't interviewed, you got all the Commanders fans saying, you don't know what you're talking about. There was interest. The problem was they have a structure that they want to put in place there, and Belichick doesn't fit that structure. If he's the coach and only the coach, great. But when you bring in this guy that's ran the show for 20 years in New England, even if you say all you're doing is coaching, he still is the guy who is in charge. Good luck being the GM who is in charge of the football operation, and Bill Belichick is your head coach. Because even though you've got power, his mere presence gives him power. He makes a face. He grumbles. You're not going to take that guy that you would otherwise take. You're going to take the guy he wants. You're going to sign the guy he wants. You're going to extend the guy he wants. You're going to give him the roster he wants. And maybe if he doesn't get the roster he wants, he just won't play the guys that you wanted. You don't want that. You don't want that. You got to be comfortable with everything Belichick's going to bring through the doors. And the fans have to want him. That's why I think it's brilliant that he's doing McAfee's show every Monday this week. He's going to do the Manning cast every time the Manning cast is on. He's joined the cast of Inside the NFL. He needs to appeal to a younger demographic who is comfortable with a 72-year-old head coach who you could argue the game has passed by. I don't believe it has, but I could see plenty of young fans saying, well, what's he done the last 6 years? What's he done without Tom Brady? It's all Brady. It's not him. Thanks, Apple TV Plus. He's got to push back against all that. He's got to ingratiate himself to fan bases out there before any owner is going to put him or herself in this awkward position of, do I give him the keys to the car? Do we find a way where he doesn't have full power and it's going to work? Before you even start down that path, your fans had better want him. It's going to be hard enough to convince the local media to cover a team that is run by Bill Belichick because the folks in New England dealt with it for 20 plus years. You got to have the fans too. So, yeah, he wants a coach. The question that we don't know the answer to yet and won't know until the season ends, what's the appetite among the fan bases of the teams that are looking and ultimately the owners of the teams that are hiring? All right. Let's see if I have anything else. Man, I've been going for a while here. One more before I answer some questions. Sunday ticket case. And I continue to trudge through the 2,506-page transcript. I think I'm somewhere in 600, 650, I don't know. And I've done some posts at PFT, and I intend to finish it. I want to get it all done before the argument happens on July 31. That's when the parties return to court for Judge Philip Gutierrez to take up the question of whether he should enter judgment as a matter of law for the NFL. Or alternatively, take the damages award of $4.7 billion, which will be tripled if and when the verdict becomes an official judgment, to $14.1 billion. Take that down to $1. That was another thing the NFL requested. So what happened yesterday or the day before, losing track of my days, I think it was 2 days ago, the plaintiffs submitted a 25-page written memorandum of law responding to the arguments made a couple of weeks ago by the NFL. And the NFL focused heavily on the idea that there were two formulas presented by the plaintiffs for calculating the damages caused by the antitrust violation at the heart of the case. And just by way of quick refresher or introduction for those of you who haven't been following the case, Sunday ticket, the out-of-market game package. You have to buy the whole package at a premium price, specifically put in place to discourage fans from getting it so they would watch the games in their local markets on CBS and Fox and keep the ratings for CBS and Fox high. It was determined by a jury that that is an antitrust violation. The 32 teams coming together to handpick DirecTV, to sell the out-of-market rights, to require the price to be high, to discourage fans from getting it so that they'll watch CBS and Fox instead and keep the ratings up. The NFL was trying to balance it here so they get maximum money from CBS and Fox, maximum money from DirecTV. That's an antitrust violation. That's been determined. Now, the NFL is still trying to attack that on appeal. But one of the big issues to be resolved later this month, the jury, according to the NFL, rejected the two models for calculating the damages presented by the plaintiffs. And the jury basically got out their iPhones, pulled up the calculator app, and came up with their own number. And the NFL's position is you can't do that. They've rejected the arguments presented by the plaintiffs for how to calculate damages, and they just came up with their own formula. You can't do that. And on the surface, there's some appeal to that. Like, yeah, do we really want juries to just do whatever they want to do, come up with whatever they want to come up with, even if it's not supported by the evidence? Here's the reality. The number they came up with, 4.7 billion, is less than the highest number that the plaintiffs put in. The plaintiffs argued that if the NFL, by way of its 32 teams acting independently, had distributed the out-of-market games on cable channels, FS1, ESPN2, whatever. Envision a world like college football. That's the example they used. Because, on a college Saturday, you turn on the TV, and here's this game, here's that game, here's this game, here's that game, here's this game, here's that game. If they had done that, if they had gotten rid of this exclusive Sunday ticket satellite-only package and just sold the games, out-of-market games, to all the cable channels out there. So at 1 o'clock Eastern on a Sunday, you'd have 9 games on different channels. On the cable package you already have bought, it costs you nothing over and above what you're already paying for access to those channels. So based on that reality, where it costs you no additional money to have Sunday ticket versus what the plaintiffs paid, the number is $7 billion. That was the high end. The other model was like around, I think, high $3-4 billion, something like that. Well, the number the jury came up with was right, not dead set in the middle, but it was between the high and the low. And the argument is, look, when you break the antitrust laws and you force a jury to figure out an alternate reality where you hadn't violated the antitrust laws, it's going to be a little messy. It's not going to be perfect. And I'll give you an example. Okay. If I'm in an accident, if I'm in a car accident, it's somebody else's fault, there will be a specific amount of medical bills, of lost wages if I can't work for a certain period of time. Those things can all be proven and shown. Those are clear. What I lost because of what you did when you rear-ended me, T-boned me, whatever you did while driving your car, while you were texting or whatever, those are my damages. Very easy to figure those out. When you're a defendant who has created an antitrust violation by basically fixing the price of Sunday ticket to discourage fans from buying it and to gouge your most avid fans. And let's remember, at the end of the day, what the NFL did here, they used the passion of their most ardent fans against them. They took advantage of the fact that people love football so much and want to watch their favorite team when they don't live in the market where that team plays so much that they're willing to be screwed in what the price was. It's virtually impossible to come up with any specificity on what it should have cost if they hadn't done that. So that's the thrust of the document that the plaintiffs submitted earlier this week. You don't get to second guess the jury's work. They found a violation. They came up with a number. They called it a runaway verdict at one point. It's not a runaway verdict when it is less than the highest number that was introduced by way of evidence that got to the jury. $7 billion was introduced. The jury went with 4.7. And the NFL has tried to reverse engineer and say, oh, it's improper that they did what they did. No. You can't do that. To boil it all down, as simple as it can possibly be, with no legalese, the plaintiffs are saying you just can't do that. You can't try to crack the code on why a jury did what it did. Evidence was submitted at 7. The jury went with 4.7, and that's it. That's it. And what happens often in cases like this? Let's say you have all the jurors who believe that the NFL was in the wrong. And in this case, they all believed it. Unanimous jury. NFL's wrong. To get to a unanimous verdict on damages, you may have to compromise a little bit. There may have been some people in the room that wanted to do 7. There may have been some people in the room that wanted to do 2. Maybe one of them said, I don't buy any of this damage. They compromise. Juries do that all the time. Cases don't get resolved by a jury without letting them from time to time compromise. It is a far from perfect system, but is the only one we have. Well, it's not the only one we have. It's the one we have if you don't have, a separate secret rigged kangaroo court of in-house arbitration that you force everyone to use. That's why we talked about this earlier. We know why big companies hate lawyers. This is also why big companies want to arbitrate. They want to take juries out of the mix because it is messy. It is vague. It is ambiguous. When you have big numbers that get put in front of a jury, they can come up with any formula they want. As long as it's not more than the evidence you put in, they're going to have a hard time making this go away. Now, it all comes down to what the judge decides to do. And there will be appeals. This is going to hang around for multiple more years. But, folks, remember this. $4.7 billion times 3, $14.1 billion, over $440 million per team. And even if the NFL ultimately wins, it's been established by this jury verdict that the NFL committed a federal antitrust violation in order to gouge their most loyal customers to get them to overpay for something that should have been available to them for a lot less money. And they did it in order to preserve the ratings of CBS and Fox because they wanted you. They argued at trial, this is all about choices. They wanted you to choose to just watch the games that were available to you from your local CBS and Fox affiliate. They didn't want you to choose to watch the out-of-market games because they wanted to keep those ratings as high as they possibly could be. And they tried to thread this needle to get the billions from CBS and Fox and the billions from DirecTV. So remember, they got to figure out what they're going to do going forward. I don't know that they're going to make any big changes until they lose. And if they ultimately lose like 3 years from now, the case only goes through 2022. You've got 23, 24, 25, maybe 26 by the time this is all said and done. Once it's all said and done, they're going to have to change their ways if they lose. If this goes all the way to the Supreme Court and the end result is, sorry, this is an antitrust violation and you must pay, they're going to have to change the way they do things. And Sunday Ticket is going to be available to all of us at a lot less money than what we've been paying. Okay. All right. I'll give you an extra long PFT PM today since I haven't done one all week. And I'm going to answer a few questions as we wrap this one up. All I got to do is find the tweet where I asked you to pose questions. I should talk even more slowly to give myself time to find it. Here it is. All right. What do we got here? PFT PM Posse, are you part of the class in the Sunday Ticket trial verdict against the NFL since you've been a subscriber for 30 years or so? I subscribed from 1997 through 2000, probably 19. At one point, I got YouTube TV. I dumped DirecTV. I knew that meant no Sunday Ticket, but I'm at NBC every weekend anyway. My son was here, and I got Red Zone through YouTube TV for him to watch that. So I got it again last year. I'm done with it. I'm not getting it. Frankly, it's my own choice. I'm not calling for a boycott here. It's my own choice. After everything I've learned from this case, I'm not getting Sunday Ticket anymore. I'm not doing it. I'm not going to let them take advantage of my fandom, especially since I don't need it. It's something that's here for anybody who happens to be in the vicinity of the barn who wants to come watch the game. So I'm out. I'm out until this thing changes. So I'm probably in like 2011 through maybe 18 or 19. I think what they're ultimately going to do, I think all you can do, once it's time to carve this thing up, there'll be a unit assigned to each person based upon the number of years they had it. So if I just had it in 2011, I get 1 unit. If I had it all the way through, I get 11 units. There'll be a number assigned to the unit, and it gets multiplied by 1, 2, 3, up to 11. And you'll have some people that I think it could be a decent amount of money. I think it could be in the thousands, less than 10, but I think it could be a decent amount of money. Now, before that happens, the lawyers are going to get their cut, as they should. The legal fees here are going to be significant, as they should be. Because without having a class action, you're going to have 2.4 million different people file lawsuits Is anybody going to file a lawsuit? With all the time and money and expense just to prove my $10,000 in losses? That's why class actions exist, and that's why big companies hate them. They are a tool for making a company accountable for a lot of small indignities that happen to a bunch of people. And that's why we end up with a number that big. PFT PM Posse, why are the Chiefs and Raiders the only two teams without joint practices? I don't know. Do you think the league is pushing teams, coaches to schedule more joint practices as a replacement for preseason games? I think that it's just happening naturally because we've already lost one preseason game and we see starters playing even less in the preseason games that are occurring. So I think this trend continues, especially with the inevitability of 18 regular season games and 2 preseason games, and at some point, 19-1. And eventually, hopefully during my lifetime, because that means I will have lived long enough to see it, which means I will have lived as long as possible, no preseason games and 20 regular season games. Everett M., here's a very specific and random question. What is your record for stories posted at PFT in a single day? I think like after the first day of free agency, at some point in the past 10 years, we had like 140. That's the most I ever counted. But that first day of free agency where transaction, story, visit, this, that, the other thing, we got everybody working at full capacity. I think we've gotten close to 150 in one single day. That's a lot. Most days, weekdays, out of season, 30 to 40, in season, 50 to 60. It's hard because you don't want to overload the page, but when you are the de facto one-stop shop, basically the new AP wire service for anything important in pro football, and we've been that way for years now, you can't just say, well, we've got a lot of stories today, we should probably stop. We should probably, we're good. There's enough donuts out there. Our goal is to put as many donuts in the case as we can, and it's driven by the number of donuts that are coming our way from the National Football League. Shad asks, what will punishment for Jordan Addison look like? Does it happen at all? Will the league get involved? Yeah, look, for DUI, that falls under league policy. I think it falls under the substance abuse policy. And I think it's a 2-game suspension now. It used to be 1. I think it's a standard 2-game suspension for any type of DUI, guilty plea, conviction, no contest, diversion program, etc. And it can go up based upon the circumstances. But I think he's looking at 2 games unless he gets a full and complete acquittal. No responsibility at all. Charges dropped. No lesser included, reckless driving, whatever the case may be. He's probably going to get 2 games. And it depends on how long this thing lingers in the court system. Maybe it'll be next year by the time he misses 2 games. But he's going to have most likely a 2-game suspension imposed by the league under the substance abuse policy. That is likely at this point in Jordan Addison's future, unless he's got a silver bullet to get out of responsibility altogether. Mr. Palmerson, given what we saw on Hard Knocks this week, did the Giants handle the Saquon Barkley situation in the best possible way? I think that's to be determined. Because if Saquon Barkley has 2,000 yards from scrimmage this year and leads the Eagles to a Super Bowl win and becomes the missing piece of the puzzle for them offensively, and they run roughshod over the Giants and the rest of the NFC East and the rest of the NFC and finally do win the Super Bowl, not finally because they did it in 2017, but it feels like they've been kind of getting back in that mode. Can they get there? Can they get it done? If Barkley's the difference maker, they should have kept Saquon Barkley. Look, overall, Hard Knocks is great for us as media, and it's great for us as fans. It's not good for the team that does it, not off-season. Preseason, fine, because it can be about the players. In season, there's a lot of stuff going on. To have months of footage that they're choosing from, and they're putting some stuff out there that I just don't think it's helpful to have that out there. True inner workings of a team, the decisions they make, why they make them, assessments of players, criticism of the offensive line. They're behind Daniel Jones, but they want to go get Jaden Daniels. I just don't think it's helpful to put all that out there for the team. For us, I'll take it. I love it. And they made an assessment that Saquon Barkley isn't what he used to be. And that they could find somebody at a lot less money, dollar for dollar. This is the whole running back conundrum. I can get somebody dollar for dollar who is more effective and better than what we have in the player that wants too much money. And we're not going to know whether or not they got it right until we see what Saquon Barkley does. If he gets injured week 1 and he's either done for the year or and I hate to say that because, you jinxed him by saying that, but we know how it goes in the NFL. We know what can happen. He suffered an ACL tear early in a season not that long ago. If he gets injured and he doesn't give a return on the investment, then the Giants look like geniuses. If he helps propel the Eagles to a Super Bowl, they're going to look like idiots. And it's just something else to worry about when you're the New York Giants. Over and above what your team does, you're going to be keeping a close eye on Saquon Barkley because the final verdict in whether or not the Giants handled this right depends on what Saquon Barkley does with his new team. And, if you watched the other night when Joe Shane was getting the news about Barkley going somewhere else, is it a team in the division? He don't want that. He would have loved for him to go out of the division or at best out of the conference. All right. There's some questions here that I'm not going to be able to get to. Ask them next week, and I'll try to get to them. JC Carm, is Russell Wilson a Hall of Famer? I think so, but this was an issue that came up with Eli Manning. And Shereen Williams, who's one of the voters, made this point. As he was getting toward the end of his career, you run the risk of weakening your case. If you're tacking some subpar years onto the back end of your best case for getting in, are you really going to get in? And for Russell Wilson, the best case for him would be to get back to Super Bowl or close to it. Then you're Kurt Warner, who might not. I think he still would have eventually gotten in. League MVP, Super Bowl MVP, burned bright for not a real long time with the Rams. It tailed off not long after their second Super Bowl appearance, the loss to the Patriots. And then Mark Bulger ended up replacing him, and then boom, he's on the Giants, the starter until Eli Manning was ready. If he doesn't end up with the Cardinals and they don't end up going to the Super Bowl in 2008, that donut hole, as Peter King describes it, that donut hole might be a sinkhole that would have kept Kurt Warner from getting in. And you wonder whether the 2 years with the Broncos and whatever happens going forward becomes the thing that undermines everything he did with the Seahawks. So I think he'd be I still think he gets in. But I think it's critical that he reestablish himself. And, if he has another bad year this year and next year, he might have to wait longer than we would have thought. I think eventually, I don't know. I think he could play himself out of the Hall of Fame if he's not careful about how much longer he plays, when he walks away, and whether or not he can turn around what we've seen the last couple of years. Manuel Villa, a couple of weeks back, you posted to everyone's delight your power rankings. At what point do you start to rethink what you thought about a team? It'll be for the next power rankings. When I did them the last time, it was a snapshot of where everyone was right then. Offseason program's over. Here's my 1 through 32 assessment of where everyone is. I probably won't do another one until week 1 or week 0. I'll probably do week 0, like once we get through the preseason. I'll do some going into the first week. I don't remember what I call them, but there'll be something when the hay's in the barn, training camp's over, preseason's played, injuries have happened or not, teams have enhanced their perception or not. We'll do it then. And then we start playing the games, and that's when they're as real as they ever are, which means they're not real at all. It's just a framework for having some conversations about what's happening in the NFL. Manuel Villa, do you think it's only a matter of time before someone sues the NFL and YouTube TV since the current lawsuit does not include them? Yes. For all I know, there already is. And I need to ask that question of the appropriate people because the Sunday Ticket lawsuit covers 2011 through 2022. As of 2023, it was YouTube TV. It's been 3 weeks since the verdict. If I was still practicing law, hell, I might have filed one the next day. Nationwide class action. Let's go. Let's do this. Because the liability has already been proven. You already have the pathway. I mean, you may have to go through the steps again to prove it again, but it's already shown that this is an antitrust violation. I can't imagine that there isn't already a lawsuit out there, and that's why there's a risk as it relates to the NFL. When do we change our ways? Because if we ultimately lose on appeal, we're going to look at multiple additional years of liability. That 4.7, 14.1 is going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. Looking for some other questions here. I need to wrap this up. Jacob Demian, I'm at the point of the dead period in the offseason where I re-listen to you and Sim's weekly picks podcast. Just curious, do you ever go back and listen to your predictions to see how much has changed? Good Lord. Let me tell you something. Let me tell you, if you're going back and listening to picks podcasts from last year, you are a fan of the National Football League, and we appreciate you going back and listening. I'd rather not know how some of those things came out, although I am aware of how some of them kind of blew up in my face. I said a certain team was going to kick the shit out of another certain team on Christmas night, and we all know how that went. But no, I'm always moving forward. I don't have time to look backward. We move forward. We move forward, and we move forward. All right, let's move forward. Paul Silva, I've heard Vikings reporters suggest J.J. McCarthy can report for training camp if he's not signed. He just can't practice. Is this true? I thought he couldn't report if he wasn't signed. I don't know how this all works. I know in the offseason and before the 2011 CBA, when most teams didn't even begin to negotiate contracts with rookies until after the 4th of July, guys would participate in the full offseason program with a letter of protection that would allow them to get the contract they would have gotten if they had signed their contract before they suffered a serious injury. Now, if you have guys who are just showing up and they're in the fold and they're holding in, but they're not under contract, can you do that? I don't like that. Let's get this done. And I think what happened with McCarthy wanted to see what Caleb Williams got. And now that everyone knows what Caleb Williams got, they can get McCarthy done. There's no point haggling about McCarthy's contract until the ceiling is set by Caleb Williams. There's been some chatter that McCarthy wants his full signing bonus within 15 days or right away or whatever. Williams is getting his within 15 days. Now McCarthy can say, give me mine within 15 days. And, you know, if you're why are you fighting this if you're the Vikings? Just pay the guy. Get him in the fold, and let's move forward with him being ready as quickly as possible to play. It's in no one's interest to play games with this. Just give the guy his money now. Let's we want to push half of it next year. Forget that. Oh, that's not how we do things. Who cares? This is your first franchise quarterback, potentially, since Fran Tarkenton. This is the highest they've ever drafted a quarterback in franchise history. Let's not F around and find out. Let's just give the guy his signing bonus. And I know it's easy for me to say because it's not my money, but what do you really prove here? Oh, this is our procedures. Look, you got to know when and where to pick your battles. That's how I look at it. Oh, looks like there might be some news here. What do we have? Is there news? Oh, he's agreed to terms. Thank you, Kristen. Boy, I like this new technology. Kristen was able to text through the app that we're using that McCarthy has agreed to terms. So, Paul Silva, thank you for your question. It has now been conclusively answered. All right, one more. Do you think Kirk Cousins can be benched this year, or no matter how both of them perform this year, it will be a redshirt year for Michael Penix Jr.? I don't know if Cousins can be benched. I guess they can do anything they want. Look, Michael Penix Jr. is going to be incredibly popular in Atlanta if Kirk Cousins doesn't play at a high level right away, whether it's because of injury or it's because he doesn't know the offense, whether it's because he doesn't have Kevin O'Connell in his ear. You know, one of the reasons that I think Cousins was as good as he was last year is it was the first time in a long time he's had the same person talking to him pre-snap for 2 straight years. If he regresses at all from what we saw last year and Penix is waiting and ready and there'll be reports at training camp about how good Penix looks, I think it's fair game at any point. If the goal is to win and you're not winning, with the guy you have, look, I think that Cousins is going to be with the Falcons for 2 years. It could be as little as 1 year because they could trade him after this year. Oh, he's got no trade clause. Well, if the choices are stay here and don't play or go somewhere else and play, he'll waive the no trade clause. But it's like $27 million next year. That's all he's owed by the next team. That makes that contract very tradable. Now, it's $73 million that they will have paid him that they didn't coming back. Is it that much? I don't think it's quite that much. They're not paying him $100 million. I got to do the math on it. It's not quite that much. But next year's guarantee of $27 million, the year after that of another $10 million, it's $63 million that they'll be out. $63 million they'll be out for 1 year with Kirk Cousins. But if Penix is the guy after this year, why do you keep him around? Why do you pay him $27 million to be on the bench? If you decide after this year, we're moving on with Michael Penix. We won't know until we play the games. Does Penix play? Does he play well? Does Cousins play well? A lot of factors to be determined. But I think there are no sacred cows in Atlanta. Once you use the 8th overall pick on a quarterback, the moment you think that that quarterback gives you a better chance to win than the guy you have, that quarterback's going to be playing. All right, that's it for today. Thank you for listening to this long, rambling edition. Not quite an hour and a half, maybe an hour and 15 minutes. We will be shorter next week. I felt bad this week because I hadn't done anything. Thank you again for some of your time. We'll be posting stories all weekend long at ProFootballTalk.com. I'll be back again on Monday and hashtag no days off, ideally until PFT Live returns after the Olympics on August 12th. Have a great weekend. Stay safe. See you soon. Hi, it's Mike Florio. Thanks for watching PFT on YouTube. Hit subscribe for the latest news and analysis from Pro Football Talk.